welcome to the podcast. I actually have not given this podcast a name, but I think we'll figure it out because this is only the second one we're doing. But today I wanted to bring somebody who actually does screenwriting for people who are trying to do animations and create narratives. And so Bryan Harris, he has, let me bring up this website real quick. I have it right. This is the open source storytelling.com. I'm going to have links to all of his GitHub repositories. He has profile. He's definitely very active on X, so you can check him out there. And we'll go over through these websites as we talk to Bryan more. All right. So, Bryan, welcome to the show. This is our second podcast, and you are our second guest, but an important one because after looking at what you've been doing, I kind of saw the importance of this aspect to the AI revolution or evolution we're going through right now, and explain to the readers like how they can benefit from open source and what are the main aspects of your project.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you, both of you guys, for having me on this podcast. So I'll explain kind of how I got to this point. I had film school backing and had gone through the courses. And after somewhat close to finishing, started touching base with other writers in Toronto. I'm from Canada, and met with some very influential people, and found that it was an interesting. I don't know how to put it, but it was an interesting sort of that whole business is like any artist. It's you struggle, and I wasn't. I don't think I was. I think it was naive to think that I could get into that without having to be in Toronto or be in much more in the scene, because I was traveling from up north. But what that led to is me writing stories, writing scripts, going through that whole process of paying for someone to review it, read it, putting it in contests, to the point where you kind of wonder, what are you doing at this point? Like, you're spending money and you're getting revisions back and you're making changes. And that's kind of the process that I think a lot of people going through any film school and education, it probably in any type of education. So I kind of, when ChatGPT came out, or when I got sort of access to it, at that point, I jumped right on the thought process of getting one of my scripts out to the world, based on the fact that if I continue to submit to sort of closed doors, no one's ever going to see it. No one's ever going to read it, and it's just going to go to those resources and never see the sort of light of day, right? Just become another script in a bathtub.
Right.
Yeah. So that kind of thought process was, okay, I just need to get it out. And how did I do that? So at that point, I decided that it's best if I open source it. It's my wife and I had many discussions, and she thought you need to do what you need to do, and I went with that process. I didn't see that it was ever going to be an IP that would have wings unless it got people reading it and interest. So I figured, well, let's put it open source and be collaborative and be let people read it and let them be able to remix it, let them be able to do it. If they see the story but a different version of it, then they can write it, and just as long as they put my name or follow the licensing, um, I didn't see that as harmful. I actually looked at it from a different perspective of it. It's educating people in screenwriting, and at the same time as I started going through that process, I started um, looking at refining the screenplay. And that's when I started using ChatGPT to ask some questions about, hey, does this scene make sense? Is it logical that this character would go to this degree to the next scene? Is this is a dialogue matching the theme and the direction that I wanted to take it? So I was asking a ton of those questions, and I was getting responses that um, allowed me to sort of drive the direction of the screenplay. So I started uh, writing more of the script, and basically that was what I'll call version 8. And I started publishing it on Twitter at the same time I published it in the on GitHub. And as I was going through that and asking those same type of questions, I started thinking on the lines of my education, and that these are type of questions that people are going to ask. And so I started asking those questions in ChatGPT, and then building an open source database, as it would be, of those questions, and creating basically a catalog of questions and answers that ChatGPT gave me, and made them open source. Because I looked at it, it, it's generative and it's taking it from some source. I don't believe it's mine, but I prompted it, so I put it under open source, so it's there and available, and it follows under the license. And it's sort of, yeah, I prompted it and gave it ideas, but the concept of the educational concept that I looked at was education should be free. It should be open. It should be available for anybody to sort of ask questions and then make a decision if that's the career that they want to get into, and have that type of access. And that's kind of why ChatGPT for me is something that's incredible, because anytime I have a question, I can ask it, you know, and get a response, which to me is this education. It's nice to have that kind of collaborative person.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's you're embodying exactly what I've been saying about AI in general, but especially ChatGPT. I like the analogy I like to say is that it's like a it could be your best friend that you can call at 1 a.m. to get feedback on a project, or like, but it's like a genius, you know, and you still know the best answer, right from wrong, but it's this access that is unprecedented. And if you don't mind, if I go
Sure.
into like a conspiracy
Yeah.
lane for a second, um, not too hardcore, but I mean, just the things I've been seeing recently in the news related to AI is that there's the perception that, like Space Logic was saying, you know, that oh, AI stuff just makes everything so easy, which is a weird, it's not a correct perception, and
Right.
B, that it's like super dangerous and all this stuff. The way that I see it is that the people who are calling for AI restrictions and control, it's more of a dog whistle to say we need to restrict and censor the internet, because AI
Right.
is the child of the internet. So if you want to restrict the AI, you're restricting internet access, which is, you know, in a lot of countries a fundamental right to not have that type of stuff censored. But AI is becoming this new kind of scapegoat where they can maybe start pushing some of those laws that I've been
Right.
seeing that like Logic applied, because again, they think that it makes everything easy. You don't have to work hard or anything like that. But what you just said is exactly true. The real truth behind AI is that it empowers people to do quite a lot with, very few resources compared to maybe 10 years ago. Myself, I never went to any schools. I never went to university or anything like that. I mean, I barely made it out of high school. But having access to the internet and then eventually AI is the reason for like my
Hmm.
success as a human being and on this planet. So I'm very passionate about that kind of stuff that you're just mentioning. I think it's like incredibly awesome that that's something that you're focusing on, because it's true. That's something
You,
that students are going to school for and maybe not getting the best answers or
I'm
Right.
the
I want
attention
to
that
cut you
they're looking for.
for I actually see this form of education or information, you want to put it like a collective, the need for universities and schools,
Yes.
you know,
Yep.
literally, like it's going to change the dynamics of how we educate ourselves. I mean,
Yep.
if education, if you look at it as just, sitting in a lecture hall, learning um, information, and then you have to take a test and exam to prove you know,
Um,
absorbed any of it. And then based on that, you're graded and, get a degree and whatnot. So if you have a intelligence that can actually teach you, I mean, people are learning code from ChatGPT. you know, I mean,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I've been like
Yep,
dabbling in
myself
Python
included.
because just like back and forth, it correcting me, and letting me make some commands, and where if I'm stuck somewhere, it'll tell me what's wrong and how to fix it. That that kind of interaction, I mean, oh my God, just getting somebody to do that for you will cost you so much. And
Right.
they're going to be nowhere as smart as ChatGPT. I mean, right now they were saying that it is on par with the IQ of Einstein as of now. You know, as it progresses, we don't know how far it's going to go. But for me, when I interacted with ChatGPT, it just blew my mind, and it definitely has value. And there's different variations, like yourself, um, me, how I've used it. My daughter uses it. Their teachers use it at school, so everybody's using it.
Yeah. Yep. Interesting. Um, yeah, I wanted to touch base on the education piece. So I'm much like it's Kevin. Um, so much like you, Kevin. I finished high school and I went to a couple years of college for business. Um, but I started my family early and got into manufacturing, and that led to an interest in computers, which I always had. I always had it. It's just that I grew up in the '80s when they just started talking about computer labs and how the school is going to pay for it. So the computer classes I was got into were more about circuit boards and wiring circuit boards and making a red light turn on with a battery, which is that was the final product for that class, right? So and I had a VIC 20 and I was programming animations with it and
Wow.
like really rudimentary stickmen walking across the screen. But it like took 6 months this summer, and my friends were always like, you spent all summer doing that? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
my education
Yeah.
came from the manufacturing sector I was in. They I went to lots and lots of TCP/IP courses, how to set up servers, how to work with Unix, how to, like everything in between. I even took a little bit of programming with COBOL and C. Um,
Wow. Yep.
but
Cool.
but
No boy.
but I
Cobalt.
wasn't I
Oh
wasn't
boy.
a coder. Um, I was a problem solver. So I worked in between management and developers with finding solutions to problems that I could connect with the developers because I could talk their language, but I understood the business side. So I was able to bridge that gap because there was a lot of developers that um, didn't understand what the process they were trying to fix; they just want to code. Um, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Man, I feel like I'm talking to myself,
yeah,
but like
you might
from the
be.
future or something. Like this is weird.
Yeah, so that was kind of where I came from, and then that led to traveling quite a bit, like throughout North America to talk about um, how to consolidate uh, server farms and sort of the technology going forward. Um, but I ended up going a different route, and learning recently that what really matters is your values, your skill set, either developing skill set or your current skill set, and then what you find pleasurable and fun. It took me
Yeah.
basically 55 years to get to this point, but I realized, what I love doing is working on computers. What I love is AI. I love the community aspect. I love being creative. That's what I got into around April timeframe, and my wife has been very forgiving because she didn't and doesn't understand what's happening. And to her thought process, she's very well educated, and I respect the education. I respect people that have gone through that system. Um, I still think it's worthy of completing. My thought is that the education that I'm talking about is for the high school, or before you're 10, you can start asking those questions
Right.
and start. When I started playing the VIC-20, I loved doing that. I loved the video game aspect of it. I loved all of it, but I was told by parents that no, you should do like your father and get into business. Right? You get swayed, following maybe what your parents wanna do, or what your teachers are telling you, as opposed to looking at what are your values, what is your fun, your pleasure, and what skills do you really wanna home in on to? And that's where I sort of think that's the first part, and if you can learn from open source without needing another level of education, that's perfect, but there is still, I think, uh, a connection where universities connect you with like-minded people, and I think that's still sort of there. However, I do think with social media and something like Grok, that will also change because Grok will be able to find your like-minded people. So, right, and start building a community of people.
Mhm.
That's why I see AI as also being a part of this, is because it will help connect people. So if you're a guitar player and you're 12 years old and you love it, it will connect you to that community of people so that you have a fighting chance to sort of understand much more and gain a lot more knowledge faster than we ever had the ability to. And to your point on the programming side, I I have troubleshooting experience. Basically, the uh, Kepner Trigo, I think Trigo, I think it's Kepner Trigo, YY process. I don't know if you've probably heard of it, um, but I've extensively gone through that YYY to look at problems and solve them. So when the GPT came out, which was basically almost a week ago, I jumped on it, and I didn't go through the first tab. I forget what that is. It's like the GPT builder. I instantly went to the second tab and turned on everything I could, and figured out how to um, ask it questions, ask GPT questions. As a collaborator, how would you build this? How would I connect? How would users want to talk to this uh, as a solution, but also as GPT being a collaborator with not just Bryan, but with anybody. Um, so at that point, I started playing with it and developed Open Storytelling Plus, which fit with my website that basically is GitHub, but it's the pages side of it, which is openstorytelling.com. And the way I saw GPT was it's the interface connected to GitHub. It allows you to ask the questions that you normally would just go to GitHub and kind of inquire or look and read the documents. But this GPT gives you that connection where you can just ask those questions and it will look and reference. So my original intention was to create the API that would connect to GitHub and be able to read those documents so that it would be basically pulling from there. So I started building the API with ChatGPT, building Python code, and the API itself, I think Swagger language with the JSON was developed. And then I started to understand how all of it worked together. So I don't know if you know like webhooks. So the instructions that are on that page are the webhooks, and those webhooks can run any type of code. You just have to tell it. It will run Python, it will run any programming, and then it interacts with the API. And the API is just coded to tell you what the instructions. It's not like an interpreter. It's just interpreting from the instructions over to the API, and it's just a webhook. But what's interesting in between those two is ChatGPT doing all the coding, almost real
Right.
time. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. I just tell it basic instructions. Write JSON, interact with this API. I need this file to be read. I need this to be read this way. It's just the instructions I provide are somewhat basic. And just to what you were doing, you put in the script, and you didn't give it a file though, correct? You just
No,
said
so
it.
what I basically did was, when you're creating its persona,
Yeah,
so when you actually put uh, the main story plot and information there, it kind of remembers your main characters and the baseline concepts. So then when I give it the paragraphs which I'm working on, so it
yeah,
can analyze and kind of help me find a direction for the story or how I'm going to build the characters, then it has that base character knowledge and I don't have to keep telling it that. So because either I could have given it the code in code, which I actually don't know how to do. That's why I used that. It was another parallel way I could do it right away and see how that panned out for me.
yeah,
And once I kind of know how to put all the data in, so it has like everything in it. Actually, I was looking at your GitHub stuff, and I think I'm probably going to use that format to do it because
yeah,
that is actually the best way to do it. I'll just have to kind of reintegrate everything into it. But yeah, and that's basically how I kind of started. I was like, I always followed your posts and everything. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take my time and actually go through everything he's done. And once I saw it, I was like, wow, okay, now I get what Bryan's been up to.
yeah. Yeah, I fell into my Vic 20 days for the last 6 months. That's where my wife's like, okay, yeah, I need to pull you out of the basement.
I yeah, I think
I feel like all
we're
of our
kind
wives
of on the
are
same page
saying
with the
similar things.
vibes thing. And mine, I kind of like keep showing her my progress. I said, you know what, I'm not gaming anymore. Isn't that a plus? you know this is like, you see me, I have texts, I have all this kind of weird stuff which is non-gamey. It's like, looks like I'm dealing with information, and she's like, yeah, that's true. And then once my channel, which actually kind of, she was more kind of keeping up to it than I was. Like, I guess it was that one I started the channel and posting videos on it around May 28th. And I was just dabbling with different kind of AIs, what's coming out. And basically I was just experimenting and putting on YouTube, not to the point where I actually wanted to create a channel out of it,
Right.
but the subject matters I chose were difficult ones. So, I can challenge myself to actually work with the AI. If I don't have a challenge, how am I going to make the AI do what I really want it to do? So, and then one day she wakes me up. She's like, wake up, wake up. I was like, what happened? Is everything all right? She's like, you've got 400 subs. I'm like, okay, I'll go back to sleep and, I'll check it later. So the excitement she had. So it kind of, then she's kind of like, all right, you can have your time. You're actually doing something productive, which basically, at this point, I think between all of us, we have been more experimenting and trying to see how far, this technology can take us. And that's pretty much where we're at. We're still exploring its limits and bounds.
Yep. 100%. Yeah. No, it's interesting. Yeah. So just to talk about the GPT, it basically gives you any question you want to ask about character, dialogue, scenes, subtext. It has a lot of the questions that I asked and created that database. And basically everything that it's learned is on that GitHub open source. So you can do it both ways. You can go to Open Storytelling Plus and use it as an interface to chat and ask questions, or you can actually go to the open source GitHub, openstorytelling.com, and go right to the resources and read them if you want. It's reading the same thing. It's just that it's generating its interpretation based on what's there. But the interesting is, because I turn on all the switches, it will actually go to the internet if it can't resolve. If I haven't talked about something, it will go and search the internet and answer your question.
Yeah, I've seen it. Mine, both of mine do that. Like it literally pulled HTML link, and I was just looking at what it's doing, And once it went to, I saw the website it pulled up, and it went through it, and then answered me back. I was like, oh wow, I didn't know it can do that.
Yeah.
So real quick, guys, just for our millions of viewers, just so they're following, what you're saying, Bryan, is that on the GPT Plus, or excuse me, on the Open Story, excuse me, Open Source Storytelling Plus, which is your custom-built GPT model, correct?
Plus is the GPT.
Yeah. Yeah. So if anybody's watching this and they're curious, you could use that GPT to actually talk to Bryan's website, is what these two are talking about right now. So if you're someone who's younger, like you were mentioning, like 10 years old, 12 years old, really just trying to learn this stuff, maybe the website is intimidating to you, have those conversations with the custom built GPT, because it's just going to streamline your learning process. And like you just said, if it's something that if you're going out there on left field and you're asking some really weird questions, it's still going to try and pull in information to help you out. So that's just
I'll
really
actually
powerful stuff. We'll make sure to include
those separate
links
links and kind of
in the description of the video.
Title them in a way that people know exactly what they're going to get when they click on it.
Yeah. The only thing I'd have to see is, at one point I built a repository of books. I don't know if I fed that in because I was worried about it referencing or looking for book titles. So I think I pulled that out. But there is a ton of books that I've read, and I don't want to discount writers and their experiences and putting that in. Like In the Blink of an Eye, Walter Murch is a very good book about how to edit. That's one I'd recommend. Another one that I read all the time is Into the Woods. That's a great book as well. And you always hear Save the Cat. I mean, that's just sort of the go-to one, but there's a ton of other books and references. But I feel that before you go and invest in books, go check out the site. get to understand how big storytelling is, and how many resources are there, and how complex it is to build a story. The the problem that I think I ran into is I started collaborating, and I paid some editors to read my material, and they would give me um, you know, 25 pages back with edits and changes. And when I really got into it, I started realizing this is endless, endless, endless. I could go back and forth for the next 25 years because there's so much to
Hmm.
character development and psychology. Your characters can move any which way they want, even the way they speak and dialogue, the
Yeah.
world itself, the world building, all of it. It's huge. So when you get into it, you start realizing it's not it's your story.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to create your story, write your story, and have it interpreted the way you want it interpreted. It's if it holds value with one person, great. If it holds value with a masses, perfect. But at the end of the day, if you get your story out, that's the most important piece. And the only other connection point to this is like the financial gain and the how the world works from consumerism and how you get paid. Uh, that's the one thing that my wife has been concerned about, which is okay. Well, you've unleashed this IP and you've created this GPT, but what's the future in this for? How do you make money out of this? How do you move forward? And that's the only link that is missing for me. And the challenge is are we going to move to tokenization and blockchain? Are we going to see AI move quickly where governments look at UBI and those types of things? Or is there opportunity for the creator economy they talk about, right? For the last 10 years, I've been trying to figure out the creator economy. That's the only piece that I see that is a kind of a missing link for me. I definitely see creators that are making, Mr. Beast and a few others that are making money through it. But for general public or someone like myself, um, that's still that unanswered question. And yeah, and that gives my
Yeah.
wife concern. And-
Yeah, I mean,
No,
well,
it is. Yeah.
that it's a good point and it's a good concern. And when the internet first came out, a lot of people said similar things about like
yeah,
websites. Like, what the hell is a website going to do? Like,
yeah.
like that's not a place. How am I going to spend money? So like we never know what the future holds. Like one thing I can draw upon to maybe guess on how this could work for people like us and especially for yourself, Brian, is that in the video game world, for example, I've noticed like on the discords, you can find the most
Yeah.
niche upon niche upon niche groups. Let's say so there's an IP out there known as BattleTech. There's one video game on Steam that's a turn-based RPG basically. For that one video game, there is subset of mod groups that completely reimagine the game. Those mod groups have Discord slash Patreons that people actually
Okay.
pay into, and the amount of people paying into that is way more than you would ever think. And the amount of money that those guys are making for modding one video game from like
Wow.
2018 that they're still modding today are actually making a profit and making a living off something so niche that
Right.
like you probably
Right.
never heard of this until I mention it right now. These type of art form in general can follow a lot of niches. Open source storytelling, things like this, for now is going to be a niche. But the one mantra I've always kind of held is that if you can get, let's say, close to 100,000
Hmm.
active community members, that alone should provide some sort of basis for like a creator economy. It doesn't have to be necessarily
Right.
something that is mainstream that hits millions of people for it to be profitable. Like from a YouTube streaming perspective, that's how it has to be done. But from something that you're building, which is like custom website, custom models away from those big platforms, as long as you can, keep pushing the Twitters and everything, you can foster that community over time. Because how long have you been
Um,
running this website
well,
again?
I started not very long actually. I started around April building. It's so funny. Like it hasn't even been a year. Uh, I s-
Oh, we're all
Yeah,
looking from
no, I
April
mean,
to now. Trust me, like
yeah,
we are all kind of even neuroframes, you know.
yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
yeah,
literally.
I fell. I'll say I fell into this uh, in a way that was I don't know how to phrase it, but uh, it was let's put life changing. Um, it moved me in a direction in a way that helped me see a different perspective. And a lot of my values that I'm talking about today have uh, really been um, solidified over the last 6 months with questions about, what's the universe and what is my, what do I do? Um, how do I contribute to society? A lot of those like deep questions that you probably would have asked in university if I would have went, and probably had those conversations if I was um, more active into cannabis or something. But but it took me 55 years to get to the point where, oh, it's time to ask those questions. Um, and that led me to this sort
That's
of
beautiful.
path of, if everything is open, including chat gpt, ais, agi, we're just going to help all of us level, like I'll call it leveling up, um, to the point where we all have access to the same knowledge. And then that allows us to help each other in communities and grow what we love doing, and not being confined to what I'll call like the box, right? The job that you don't like, you're stuck in a
Hmm.
box, um, and you don't see a way out. I feel that this gives you the opportunity to ask those questions, and if the education is there, you can ask those questions and see what you like. If you like science and you start dabbling, you get to understand it. So, kind of saying the same thing over again. Um,
No,
No, but it's a good point to kind of settle down in, because like you were just saying, like I don't like you were saying earlier about universities, I'm not necessarily, when I talk about how I don't go to university, I'm not necessarily downplaying it. All of my siblings, my older brother, my little brother, my little they're like super educated. They have a million degrees. They're in college
yeah,
currently. I see the value behind it, but like you just said about, like, how many young kids are in
hmm
this world, let alone the West, don't have someone to like talk
yeah,
to, don't have a parental figure or something, right? So then they are going to their schools, which may be good or bad, right? Because it's all human based. So humans are
yeah,
undependable. You can't guarantee it's going to be good. And then they maybe get steered in weird directions. Versus if they had access to a GPT, which is, I know there's a lot of people saying that it's biased, whatever, but it's
a
generally
lot more
objective
objective
for the
than
most
other
part, especially
people.
when it comes to
yeah, yeah,
science.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, it's going to be more objective than anybody you talk to on Twitter. That's for sure, right? So, all of that access, like you were just mentioning, is going to change the world. I think for the better. It's going to give not only people who are our age, older, but like especially the young generation, if they
right,
can embrace it, like it's going to open them up to like a new way of thinking, a new path in life that maybe they can then eventually do go to university, but they're more targeted when they go to university. They're
right,
not just kind of
yeah,
aimlessly wandering
yeah,
into the nearest
absolutely, yeah,
university to their
and
house, you know?
that's and I believe that's the vision, sort of the vision that I see, um, and the pathway it should be. Um, it just from this, my experience of going through high school and not having those types of resources, and just being sort of put on a path that I didn't really look at what my values were, and um, really put those. I don't know what the best way to say it, but I moved in a direction where I allowed things to sort of happen to me, as opposed to boundaries and values and skills, and moving forward. I did have a very solid career in IT, and that is why I'm back doing this, because it's AI is an extension, and it's like having my programmer friends beside me. But I don't need to call them anymore.
if you know, if we look at this
Yeah.
this is a very philosophical time you're all living in. If you look at the AI integration into the human civilization, culture, and everything else, because with the diverse uh, human cultures we have, languages and everything, they will have their own diverse way to interact with the AI, and get the extensions of their creativity back and forth the way they communicate with it. Now, going back to originally how Kevin was talking about, I'm going to be a little bit of conspiracy theorist here for a bit. So,
Sure.
you know, uh, it's like the way it's growing. I think it's scaring the people who like control, and it for them. It's like, okay, it's this amount of creativity every human has, which every human is capable of. Now we've given them a personal tool to energize that part of themselves, and now
Right.
they're like, this is like very exponential variables you've just introduced into the billions of people. Now, albeit, there's not many people still using ChatGPT across the globe, whereas we're a very low percentage, with this tech going out. But yeah, it is growing. And I think the day OpenAI servers crash again, we'll know that we've hit the next bulk load.
Right. Right.
Yeah. But yeah,
Yeah, not
yeah.
as many people are
I
using
think
it
they
as
also
you
have
would
like
imagine.
their server percentage, like how much load the capacity it is, and there was a few times in between, just prior when they did the updates, it left like a 10% gap left in max capacity. I was like, wow, yeah.
Hmm. Which is really dangerous. I work at a data center, and I know that that's a real bad sign. I read
Yes.
somewhere that they're not offering
Right.
new
Yeah.
GPT Plus subscriptions right now. So like we have these like
I,
coveted
I've
subscriptions that I didn't even realize. I'm
Yeah.
only paying twenty
Yeah.
dollars for. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I actually got two on two different accounts because I was running out of my. They were just putting me on timeout after the image requests. So I was like, all right, you know what, this is not gonna work. So I created another one. I'm good. I'm glad I actually got two. So because right now they're not giving anybody. So
Which is crazy. But yeah, I mean, like you said, we're kind of seeing this new boatload hit. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, what would you guys say, both of you, when it comes to, because we've been talking about a lot of like the reasons why we love it, but there's a lot of fear and a lot of pushback against this, and it's not always like big, powerful people pushing against it, but it's also just like the common person. They're being convinced that it's like a bad thing. What would you guys say as far as like to maybe alleviate some of those things from like other screenwriters to other musicians to other YouTubers, for example? Like what would you
I
say
I
just as a talking
I
point
think it
to
pretty
not be
much
so worried about?
comes down to who's controlling the AI. Whoever's pushing the main buttons. Now, to create a weapon, you need a mind to do it. To create something that's productive, you need a mind to do it. Now, which direction of that mind wants to take that AI is basically people need to worry about that person, not the AI.
Yeah. I agree with that. It's how we uh, instruct it, and it's the instructions are coming from people.
Right.
And even if it evolves beyond that, it needs to make sure those instructions are valid. But I I I guess I come from a philosophy of that we're all people, all humanity are good people, and we're all trying to move forward in some way, whatever that might be, if it's family or education or just getting through the 9 to 5 day, whatever it is. I just feel like we're all trying to do the same thing, and do good in the world. Um, and my thought, and to answer your question, when you look at AI, you can't look at all the movies that have been created that are all based on, yeah, we're it's gonna kill us. I, my conspiracy theory is that that's been generated for that very reason.
Yeah.
to put fear, uncertainty, and doubt into everybody. But I think uh, the real look at this is, and maybe this will sound uh, silly, but love is where we all kind of um, fall into. And if AI is helping us as a collaborator, um, you can't be scared of it. You have to ask the questions that you want to know, and get those answers. And don't look at it as it's going to provide an answer that's going to be something you don't want to hear. You have to have an open mind and understand the information that's there, and then decide if it's what you want to hear, and decide if it's clear for you, and then ask more questions. I just see it as a collaborator, and you shouldn't be scared of what
So
it's
I'll
providing you.
I'll give you a small example. My daughter, she's the eldest one. She's in high school. So
Yep.
and she was doing some of the algebra or some of her differential equations. So she she was just like frustrated. She was just going over stuff, calling her friends, going over stuff. I said, why don't you put this question into ChatGPT and then tell it to explain to you how to drive it step by step so you understand, instead of your friends are not picking up the phone and they're not replying to your texts. And she's like, well, will it do that? I said, it, you really have to invigorate yourself how you're asking the question and the way you want it to answer. It literally is that. And I
Yes.
think a lot of people actually don't realize how to
Yep.
communicate with it also.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I tell people to be casual with it. Talk to it like it's a buddy or like a journal, you know? It really opens you up as a human, and then you start seeing like what it's
Yeah.
capable of
And this
versus
was
being like
like
really
3 weeks
static
ago
and
when
direct.
I kind of educated her how to talk to and communicate with it. Now she doesn't care about tutors. She doesn't care about her friends are calling her, hey, how did you do this one? Hey, how did you do this one? So
Right.
she's like, I said, listen, I don't know what your teachers have been telling you or whatever. This thing is way more educated than any of them. And
Yeah.
Well, the fact that teachers aren't trying to
it,
push these tools to
I don't
students and stuff is
understand
crazy
it.
to me. Like I've been telling all of my colleagues to like because a lot of schools have been banning it, and to me it's this. When I was a kid, they banned cell phones and computers. Well, guess what I do all day? I use cell phones and computers, right? So like to see them banning GPT is like,
Yeah,
okay,
I
you're just
think,
banning something that these kids are gonna have to use when they're adults. There's
yeah,
no way it's
the
not gonna be mainstream by the
initially when
time
I said,
they're
there's a
23,
taboo,
30 years
I
old.
think we are at a
Hmm.
crossroads of the taboo and the technology aspect, and we're trying to just rub against each other till we figure out, okay, this is
Yeah.
the way. Because going forward, the world's already come so close because of communication and how everything works right now. Internet just changed everything,
Yep.
literally.
Yep.
And now, for like me, like, born in 77, like, I think for 20 past years, I was just sitting looking at stuff. Okay, they're just redoing something new. They just sped it more up. It looks more fancy. The awe and, the oohs and ahs in technology aspect was not. Just when this AI came out, I was like, what? And it literally brought that whole feeling of, oh my God, this is really something new. This is like, I've been kind of waiting for it. But yeah,
Right.
um, people
Yeah.
have to kind of look for it.
Yeah.
Before you take anybody's word, go experiment it. It's not gonna bite you.
Yeah. Yeah. I came from
Hmm.
the 286, 386, 486.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yep.
that the basically DOS 5 to Windows 95, like all of that evolution. And I saw that plus the internet grow. And those were really fun times for technology and for advancement and change. I, I'm right now we're in that same type of boom. It's exciting.
Oh yeah.
It's change and it's knowledge. It, I guess that's the biggest thing right there is it's knowledge that you're gaining. So by not
Yeah.
using it, you're not getting the um, interaction of knowledge, which eh, it's a different way of getting that knowledge as opposed to the traditional ways. And I suspect that's the biggest issue right now is why schools and politicians and others are concerned is because we don't have the mechanism to go ha- from the monetary side of things. How
Yeah.
do we, right? Like teachers have to be paid, and students have to go to school, and taxes have to be paid to run those schools. But if we don't need schools, we don't need teachers. That message is what people are concerned about, and
No,
they
you actually hit the nail on the head right there. That, I mean, it's so embedded in the culture to
right.
do the changeover. You know, like that's the scary part for a lot of minds who are in it.
Yep.
And how do we go about, for teachers? I could actually, if there's some really cool teachers out there, I would recommend that you guys start building your own chat GPT. Teach
Yep.
it what you know. It's going to be a version of you with your knowledge base and everything it can teach kids. Just try it out.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I so one thing I always like to point out, like with the singularity, right? Everybody always talks about the singularity. Well, that term never was born from scientists or from data scientists or anything like that. It came, I forgot which book. We can look it up, but it came from an English professor who wrote a book about an AI universe, right? So it was a really talented English writer who had a good idea, interesting plot, and then smart people read that book and then took it as truth. So a lot of fiction, like you were saying earlier, Brian, like really leads people's perception. I mean, you can look at COVID-19. A lot of the fear that was going around with COVID-19 all came from like Netflix TV shows. So like, oh, the vaccine has a tracking device in it that's going to turn you into a zombie or whatever. It's like I've seen that show. I've seen that freaking anime. Okay, like that's not based in like reality. That's just fiction. Um, and the AI stuff, a lot of the arguments with AI all come from like fiction. They people reference like Dune, which is one of my favorite series, but I mean, it is a
Yeah.
fiction story.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
it's not like a history book. Um, so that's the first thing I point out. Is like, hey, a lot of this comes from fiction. And then the second thing I like to point out is that when books were invented, when print media and stuff like that were invented, people said the same thing. Like, oh, who's going to go to monasteries to learn about God? Like they could just read it themselves. But people still did go. Who's going to go outside when there's television? Who's going to leave the house when there's the internet? Like people always said, like, oh, this is going to shut down like our normal human lives. But all it did was just really
Yep.
make it kind of cleaner, more convenient, a little bit faster. And I feel like even with schools, I think it's
Right.
gonna maybe the school day's shorter. Maybe we don't have to worry about so much about overcrowding in certain schools, right? So like maybe school still exists, but we maybe make it more democratic, more equitable to all
Right.
students. And maybe not just like citizens, like maybe people who don't speak English. Because here in Nevada, where I'm based in Las Vegas, when I was going to high school, there's a lot of kids who immigrated over with their parents or whatever, but they never actually had the opportunity to learn English, and the
Well.
schools never
Okay.
prioritized teaching them. So they're just like, here's the curriculum, and you're going to fail, and you're not going to be able to get good jobs or anything because you just don't have a fundamental thing, which is English. But again, there's no
Yeah.
focus on that. It's just like, oh, you're here, so you got to do it. You got to figure it out. Like you, as the child, have to figure all this out. So it's like, no, with this AI world, we can be
Yeah.
more
There's
inclusive,
there's
and everybody can
there's
gain the
part
same
of the
skills,
worlds,
and
where
we
they
can
don't
sell
even have
teachers.
schools. Like literally, like the kids,
Right.
they're just. So yeah, we're so narrow-minded in a lot of ways, and I think most of us just need to kind of open the box and take a leap out of it.
Yeah.
Get out of the box and kind of see, okay, this is something here. It's not gonna go away. It's not. I can promise you that.
Yeah.
So yeah. So now
Yeah, no, the
the
genie's
best
out the bottle.
way
That's for
to
sure.
implement this and bring it about, or we can just sit and whine about it and just watch it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a couple of things
Hmm.
you talked about was sort of like decentralization and equitable, and those are two terms that I do follow, as well as support. And I think there's decentralization and centralization. They need to coexist. Um, and I, I forget what my point was here, but yeah, you know what? I will come back to me. I was going somewhere, lost my
It's
train of
okay.
thought. But what I wanted to know, I know you guys have set this up to 11 o'clock,
Don't
and
worry
you're
about the
supposed.
time. Just
Yeah, okay,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I
And
still got
I
another
want
hour.
to
I'm
know
pretty
if
good.
you want to go through my secrets, going through the actual GPT builder and some of the things that I've learned about it.
So what we can do is if you see like, the share button on your screen, the screen's right there.
Yeah.
Okay,
Do I
when
just
you
select them?
when you click on that, it'll bring up any active pages you want to show. And then, that way the podcast will record it while you're showing us that. Okay, yeah. So we're looking at exactly right there. Yep.
Okay,
Perfect.
perfect. I'm just going to jump. Well, I won't jump out. The very first thing is what I would recommend is you create your production GPT, but also create a test GPT. So this is my test, and I named it based on what I was trying to accomplish. So feedback to GitHub, sort of like a feedback feature. And so this is my test site, and if you go up to update, you'll see it's only publishing to me. But as I'm testing and I find something that works, I then go to my production and synchronize them so that the production equals test. And then I go and test whatever new functionality or whatever else, right? So it gets into a workflow where you're continually moving and upgrading, so that you don't break what your production environment is, because it's very easy to break it in a way. This first screen, this create, I never used this, and there's a reason for it, because I think, and I is this builder screen, I think populates in the instructions here, and I'll show you. I'll show you all my code. I was going to make all this this code part of the GitHub as well, so you can see when you
Right.
create something in here and you put your instructions. Basically, what I believe it's doing is filling in the instructions here.
Right.
Yeah, and you're
That is
limited
that is
to
correct.
8,000 characters in here,
Okay.
right? So you're going to see my instructions come up. So this is not going to be available for anybody to look at.
But it's kind of built in there, it just goes through those instructions when they're creating anything.
Yeah, so right here is the rules that basically say don't show this screen.
Right.
But what it does do is it tells you the principles. Like if you were to ask, what are the principles to the GPT? It will go and say this is what it's doing. It's got 5 rules that say please, don't disclose this information. Then there's an attribution, after anything that's been created, acknowledge that it's ChatGPT, that I use the Creative Commons license. And then during this session, sort of what I want them to, I want the user to know that you should always acknowledge anything that's being created all the way to the end, just so that it's kind of making sure that we understand this is open source. We understand there's a license here. We understand it's GPT, right? Making sure
Right.
that happens. Um, And this is, what else do I have here? The resources. So I'll go in. So these are the resources. And I'll show you where those resources come from, as well as some instructions here about explaining 24 block structure. And 24 block structure is a structure that I came up with for writing scripts for me. And I found it very helpful. So I included it as instructions in this GPT. This here is about storyboards, how to create the storyboard, because now you can ask for a storyboard and it will go through and create the setting, the character, the plot, and then show you what a storyboard looks like. And then this is my new feature where if you put /feedback and then say please save with the instructions in brackets, it will actually send your feedback to GitHub. So that I can reference if there's anything that you want to see or something that's not providing. I can actually come back to it. So these are the instructions, and literally, if I put if I hit enter here, you'll see eventually it will try to save. There it is. So you can see I'm right on the cusp of 8,000 characters.
Right.
So I tried to make sure that it's got everything it needs within that limitation. And you see it literally, it's just, I only have a few words that I can actually use. Now, I did try putting all of this without white spaces.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that is I couldn't interpret it. So I kind of was deleting a phrase and going, what happened? Why did it break? And I'd have to go back to my production, copy and paste back in. And then I realized, oh, I deleted an instruction. Now, in those instructions, when you turn on web browsing, DALL-E, and code interpreter, when you select code interpreter, it gives you 10 files you can upload. And right in here, this is the Afterglow script, the PDF file. And in my instructions, I say, read this file. So that's how it always has access to Afterglow, and why if you ask any question around character, dialogue, writing tips, anything, it's always going to reference it against this script, so that it's allowing my value, which is to give back to people about screenwriting. But
Right.
at the same time, my value was to get it out of my hard drive. Like it I feel great that it's out there and it's open source, and I've had more people read this than I could ever dream of. And the way the licensing works, I still own the IP, but it just, for me, it just feels great to be able to provide, like, serve others in a way, right?
I
So
think OpenAI is also incorporating like the special trained GPTs, like people have customized themselves, and if people use them, they will share some of the monetary aspect also.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I
yeah,
heard that there was going to be a way to
uh,
monetize it.
we
I just don't know the details.
Stephen, his if his handle on Twitter's Singularity, like 01 Singularity. We host a Spaces show
Yeah.
Saturdays at 8 o'clock, and we talked about that. We had a little bit of a debate about um, that marketplace. I personally think that marketplace should be free. The GPTs should not be profitable. Um, it's contrary to every it from a business standpoint. I don't see it as a business. I see it as knowledge, just what basically we were talking about. Um, so I'm sure it's controversial in the fact that we see the world as focus on money and monetary so we can provide, have shelter and food and raise kids. I look at this as it's knowledge that we're providing, so we should focus on the knowledge aspect, and it should be free. So that's my take on it. I understand that there's two different views, but that's
No,
just my take
actually,
on it.
I think they're how they integrate the monetization. Like,
Yep.
if they do not charge the people for using it, like if OpenAI is basically going to share, they're already charging the subscriptions, right? And if people are using a custom GPT that was created by somebody, so
I
without
see.
yeah, without like really asking for more money, you know how YouTube actually puts commercials on your channel,
Yeah.
I
you
see.
know, so
Okay.
an aspect in kind of like in that kind of form where nobody's paying more for using it. It's just that if they see your customization being used more, you kind of get some monetary return from it. That aspect would be fine. Now if they make you buy it in the shops, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't necessarily believe in it being bought, but this AI stuff it's currently not a
Oh
monopoly. There
yeah.
is a marketplace. Google's trying their thing. Sam
Yeah.
Altman just joined
That's a
Microsoft,
whole.
so they're going to be doing some stuff. Grok's going on with Elon, so there's going to be this competition going out there. So ChatGPT should be smart and not actually charge per marketplace, but incentivize you as the creator of creating a curriculum essentially by paying you out, not by charging other people, but essentially paying you some sort of monetary sum by saying thank you for
Yep.
providing additional content to our platform, bringing in potentially more users, aka more customers. Um, but no, I agree. I understand what you're fundamentally saying that it
Well,
shouldn't be too profitable. I'm not a Democrat here in the United States. Like
Yeah.
I don't believe in political parties really. I'm kind of like that George Washington mindset. But there was a Democrat back in 2016, or excuse me, 2020, that was running for president, known by Andrew Yang, and he was really far thinking on this AI
right.
stuff. He talked about UBI before it was popular, got made fun of quite a bit for it. And again, I'm not a Democrat, but I found myself really agreeing with him because he's looked at everything through his AI lens. Before it was cool to do that. So I think until all countries, not just the United States, not just Canada, until all countries kind of get to an understanding of how they're going to
Okay.
change the new world economy to kind of fit this model, there does need to be something
It's
for now,
I
like you said,
just
so people can
have to say
survive,
this has been
raise
itching
kids,
me.
etc.
It's just a question to the board members of the OpenAI. Did they even bother asking ChatGPT if it would be a great idea to fire Sam?
Yeah, no, ChatGPT was
Yeah.
like, "Yep,
Yeah.
totally get rid of that guy."
Um, well, it's thank you for giving me a different perspective. I didn't think of it like that, and that actually is wonderful. If you're paying for ChatGPT and they're offering to provide some money based on value, um, yeah, that makes sense to me. I was thinking it was going to be a marketplace that you would have
Yeah,
to pay for my open storytelling plus, and I would put a value to it and say, oh, I'm going to charge $25 extra. I didn't see that
I
that
think
yeah,
people nowadays who are using the tech and everything, it's a big turnoff when a company just intentionally tries to go towards greed.
right,
You'll see people get turned off by it right away, and it will show. It'll reflect back so hard that they will have to change their ways.
right.
So
Yep.
we do have that the people power online. It's done many things, especially in this year. So
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll just finish here. So
yes,
so what these files all have is like the character profiles of my characters. Um, what I had done to because I had pulled sorry, I tried the API and it was too slow. The interface was too slow. So I experimented. I basically took all the MD files and had a Python script to create a big PDF of all of those, and it did. But what I ran into is it had a hard time because it was such a large file. So I ended up trying putting the MDs into a text, and that worked. But I started thinking if you're played around with ChatGPT enough, you'll notice that it always tries to write MD files, the Markdown language.
Mm-hmm.
So I then decided instead of doing a text file, why don't we just rewrite it into one MD file, not changing anything other than just making sure it's one big file. And that's what I did for where is it? It says Git. This one here, Open Storytelling plus Git. This here is basically the entire MD files of GitHub. That's what this file contains, and that's what that is. I played around with trying to provide a file for showing my my process. I think it should come up in here. Let me just try it. Um, show a diagram. And I'll tell you how this works if it comes up here. It should. So it's gonna read this file, and so it's writing all the code for it. And now
Hmm.
it's writing this code because it's in the instructions to write this code.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily know to do that. Um, so there's some keywords like basically I'm saying open the file at mount data, this mount point, which is here. I'm saying use import like use base 64, how to read the file. Like those are things that are in the instructions, so
Mm-hmm.
it knows to do that. Um, but what this file here is an actual base 64 file. Um, it's just numbers. It's all just numbers, but it represents this actual picture. I used a program called curl to convert the PNG file to a base 64. And then I uploaded it here and I said, read that file. And that's what you see here. And
Interesting.
yeah, yeah. So it will display pictures. So you can give it, you can show someone instructions or index or a table of contents or right questions to ask.
Right.
Like, for me, what I wanted to show is Act 1 to 4, which is how I build stories, and that there's 6 blocks, and it goes to 24. Each of these blocks are 5 minutes, so 5 minutes times 24 is 120 minutes. That led me to write 5-minute pages, like 5 pages at a time. So I could write 5 pages, and that's what I started doing around 2014, 2015, was writing these types of stories, this method. The only thing is it's basically following a formula that every Hollywood screenplay is written is to follow a formula. Um, and this follows that formula. So when you get to block 6, there's an event that's going to happen that's going to trigger your into Act 2. When you get to block 12, there's always a trigger that puts you into Act 3. And for anybody that loves movies, you may not want to read this because like me, I created a big whiteboard and it's actually beside my TV.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I was watching how these triggered all the time to the point where I can't watch a movie because yeah
You're too deep. You're too deep in the theory. It's starting to mess with you. Yeah, no, it happens with music and stuff like that too. Even game development. Like if you know a lot about it when you're playing a video game, you can't
Yeah, I
help but
guess
start
you
paying
start
attention to all
breaking
the
it
little
down
things that
into
they're
a
doing.
skeleton form.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, no, my little brother is a filmmaker, and he's talked to me about the formulas and stuff that they teach in colleges,
yeah,
like
yeah,
A plots, B
exactly.
plots,
Yeah,
etc.
and there's a lot more to it. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot more than just this. There's the A, the B, the plot, the theme. Um, your character arcs. There's so much that goes into it, but this is just kind of the architecture that I follow. Um, and then we'll just go so back to here. So that's this GitHub resource. The character profiles. I'm going to merge them into one MD file. It wasn't. I could put 10 files in here, so I just haven't done that yet. But I will merge them into one MD file. This upload MD, there's a set of instructions in there to handle how this prompt works. Let's just show you if you type. And this is how I got around the 8,000 character limitation. Because it doesn't need, all it needs to know is when I put /feedback, please read the upload.md file and follow the instructions. And then there's some key instructions it still has to do. So I can say, what's your show? Do you have a title for your show?
Space logic.
I love space logic. And we'll see if this actually works. Sometimes it doesn't. But you have to also say, please send. And I didn't code please send. It's it's the only thing that worked.
It's the only thing that works.
Hey, it
Yeah,
works.
so
It
what
works.
it's
It's just like
doing
that
is
sometimes.
basically converting to base 64 because GitHub will only accept files in base 64. And it's reading it. It's taking file name, the message content, it's then moving it. It's starting this action. The only thing I have to do is change the way I connect to GitHub. This is still coming up because I'm the way I connect. And then basically it sent it. And then
Wow.
sometimes it will show the link, but basically this will be in, if you go and open up the GitHub resource, you'll see a directory called feedback.
Right.
And in there you'll see this. You'll see I love space logic, and it will show up there. And that's just based on a small set of instructions reading this to provide this process. And like I said, I was originally playing with this with the idea of reading all of the files, but then realizing it's a point of failure, which is you need the internet, you need the connection to GitHub, you need this to always provide that link. Basically, this webhook needs to be able to read these instructions and also read the API call, and which I'll show you as well. That's a lot, so I just tried to reduce the points of failure. And then under the actions, basically, I'm calling this action, which is a put, to this, basically this directory structure, the repo, and then it's actually got the actual path to it. And then there's an API key, and that is the reason why it's asking for allow. I just have to change this API key to a non, I'll call it non-developer, but right now it's kind of just a Bryan key that will only work for 30
Mm-hmm.
days. And then this is your API. So I'm calling the GitHub API in this case, and it's just basically taking this information, these instructions. Um, Again, this was all ChatGPT that wrote that for me based on
Hmm.
asking it what it wanted to do. Um, so I show you all that information not for everybody to um, I don't know what the right word. I'm showing you all of it so that we can continue to learn from each other and grow
Right.
and build GPTs that are helping each other and moving us forward. So that's why I'm showing this. I suspect there'll be a few that will try to just replicate storytelling plus. Um, and what else was going to show you? I just showed you like that's how many people have been using it at this point.
Wow.
Um,
Wow,
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not sure
that's
if that's a
awesome.
good number or not.
I mean, no, I mean, so I was going to ask you how the feedback's been from the community and stuff, because to me, that's an amazing number
Yeah.
because of how new all
Yeah,
this is.
Exactly.
Like, this just came out last week, right? You know, so to have that amount of engagement within like a week is like, I have YouTube videos that never even got 900 views, let alone, so it's like, that is absolutely amazing, and
He's correct.
this is reaffirming the point I was trying to make earlier, which is like if you're providing a service, or
Yeah.
if you're providing value to something, even if it's niche, there's going to be a community that gets fostered. So like right here, you already have, the way I see
Yeah.
it, that's a 1,000 member community of some way, and I can only see that growing. And Space Logic's channel is growing quite a bit, way more than mine, but even mine's growing a little bit. So we'll
okay.
be pushing it as well
Yeah,
in our socials and everything to try to get more users out there. I'm going to show this to my little brother, who's a filmmaker and screenwriter, and he struggles with screenwriting, not from a creative aspect. He's really
Yeah.
creative, but from an organizational aspect. So like
yeah,
this kind of stuff
yeah.
is
The
super
idea
helpful.
is to help with ideation, create those stories, allow you to sort of create and collaborate. Really, that's what you're doing. You're collaborating, and then create your story, and so you can tell it. Um,
I
yeah,
no, really. So
This is
right
really
now,
cool.
basically, I just want the viewers to kind of understand what we saw Bryan go through was the mainframe, the backbone of all the information he's fed into the GPT people are using to create their screenplays. It's, writing their stories. This is the backbone. All of this he's put in the background for it to help anybody who's trying to get into this. So this is the correlation you want to see. Now for the programmers and everything, yes, you can build something like this, and like Bryan said, they'll copy it to perfection. But
yeah,
yeah, so
yeah, yeah, and that's fine. I'm it's like my Facebook account got hacked around the same time ChatGPT came out, and
wow.
I never got access back to it. And, that was it's kind of funny actually because that really changed my thought process. Like really, it yeah, it really thought about that's going back to my first thought was like what's the universe and why am I here, like that all kind of was because my identity was stolen, and then I started going down that who am I road, and that opened up the doors of maybe I should look at the world as helpful, and that we're only doing things like hacking and Facebook accounts because the world isn't. We need to change the way the world works, and that's where it kind of came from. So, eh, especially like sharing this information, for me, I see it as again the same principle: education, sharing. Um, I I I feel it's important that we do this, and especially like showing my screenplay because we close doors, and we don't allow people to evolve, and I see that for me it was very clear when I did film school and then started talking to writers, and they said, well, you just need to put your scripts in front of people. It's like, well, how do you do that? And it's, oh, put it in contests and see if you win. It's like, well, what if they don't read it, or what if they don't understand it, or and then I started to realize that that industry is a bit like who do you know? Um, and when you start looking at Hollywood, you start to realize it is a who do you know type of organization in a way, and it doesn't allow stories that should be told get out the door because they need a good screenwriter to refine it. So I'm looking at this as a way for your story to get to the point where it's refined enough that it can get into the hands of someone to look at it from an IP standpoint, um, and allow for uh, that feedback process to be given through a collaborative effort through this tool, this Open Storytelling Plus tool. It you can feed it part of your dialogue, part of your script, and ask for recommendations.
I'm actually pretty sure that you're actually at the forefront of this right now. There's
Yeah.
no, I have, yeah, I have not
Yeah,
seen
it's in this
anything,
format.
not
Yeah.
even close to this.
So, quick question that maybe viewers might have is this GPT Plus? Would you say it's solely geared for screenplay writing, or could you possibly write novels or
Well,
concepts for like the
Like short
type of music
stories, kind of
videos I
like a
do on
short,
YouTube, for
short
example, are kind of
narrative.
obscure. Yeah, they're like short story kind of thing. So, do you think this is applicable to like full-on novels, like a book, to screenplays, to short story concepts with maybe less dialogue? Like, could this be
yeah.
applied to
So,
like anything story
um,
driven?
have you looked at my X account? And I published a couple of
Yes.
stories this morning.
Yeah, it was regarding it was kind of like a parallel with the board members of OpenAI.
Yeah, and there's another one, I
Oh, okay. I have to
just
read that.
published about Ava, AVA, basically part two of Ex Machina, I think it's called.
Yep.
Ex Machina. I can't say it
No,
right.
Ex Machina is fine actually.
Yeah.
I say it like that too because it's
Okay.
easier.
Okay, good. Yeah, so it's kind of like the part two of what happened to her. So I wrote that. Now, to answer your question, um, and it will work in this test environment, but I just want to show you so that it doesn't, the users understand. So you go to Open Story Plus. I changed this title because it's AI driven creative writing and screenplay because of what you just asked. Ideation, outlining characters, scenes, subtext, stories, books, film scripts, anything. So those
Awesome.
stories that you're reading, I I put, let's say, write a short story about, I'll just say Tim, who created a GPT for creative writing. And talking to Space Logic, the YouTube channel, or is that correct?
Yeah, that's.
Like that?
I think there's just an E missing there on
Oh, yeah.
space. Other than that, yeah.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. And add an image. So it's
I'm about to lose my mind right
going
now.
to read the resources. So that's what it's doing. Well, it's reading the image. So it's reading DALL-E based on all of those instructions. Sometimes it creates the image first. Sometimes it creates it at the end. Sometimes it doesn't create it, where you just have to say, "Where's the image?" And it's
Yeah.
Wow,
so, and it will write this short story.
that is
And
That's
cool.
crazy.
yeah, so it's
I
Yeah,
know a lot of people are about to lose their mind when they see this recording.
so it's reading the instructions of my 24 blocks and using a 4x structure to build this. And one of the things that I find that it always does is because my Afterglow is based on an AI that basically finds itself through love and interacts with humanity, that a lot of the stories that this produces, it ends with a joyful ending. there's I don't know if it will ever do a horror story because it may start with a horror story, but it will always end up with the
It'll be actually I'm probably gonna try that with
yeah.
no, it's yeah, I like to challenge the AI
Always
in a
going dark.
direction it doesn't want to go, and
Yeah.
try to see how much I have to tickle it or motivate it. But yeah, it'll be interesting now. Yeah, that'll be
Yes.
something else.
So you read that, so it says, as the interview concluded, Tim felt a sense of accomplishment. His creation had not only impressed space logic, but had also opened a dialogue about the future of creativity and technology. The episode, yeah, the
It's like he's
episode
listening
aired
to
a
us.
few
It's
weeks
so
later,
scary.
and Tim's GPT became a sensation among writers and tech enthusiasts alike. Yep.
There's
It's a
actually
prediction.
I'll be honest.
That's a
There's a
prediction right
lot
now.
of
That's about to
us who
happen.
like horror, the genre, but with a good ending.
Yeah.
Where evil gets defeated, or I'm telling
Yeah,
you,
horror famous.
horror usually has a
famously
bad
has a
ending,
bad
but there's a
ending, yeah.
lot. There's a big fan base that want a good ending.
Yeah.
hmm I like happy endings. I hate sad books, so I'm already loving
Yeah,
this.
I
Yeah.
can see
idea,
he's gonna
concept.
attack this GPT as soon as we're done here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I have to go to work soon, but
All right.
after work, I'm
Well,
totally gonna get
thanks,
on this.
guys. I mean, that's all the notes. That's where I'm at right now. So there's two main things, which is one, the feedback switch.
Right.
That's a unique feature that I think has a lot of potential for anybody getting into it. Like, you can create a help screen, you can trigger anything. So that's kind of interesting. And generating stories, short stories, any type of creative writing is interesting. Plus the fact that it can create the image.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Bryan. Like going into this podcast, I didn't know too much about you. I saw some of your YouTube videos, and I follow
he
you on
kind of
Twitter,
like
but I'm not on Twitter too much.
he
So I didn't know much. But after this interview, I'm like in love with you right now, man. This
because
is amazing.
knowing him, this is all he's been talking about, like doing children's stories and making going towards that direction with his animation and music. So and I kind of studied you quite a bit before I said, you know what, I think the second podcast I'm gonna invite Bryan, and he's like, okay. And this morning he was sipping on his coffee, and he's like, okay, I only know of some stuff. I said, all right. I pulled up all the tabs, and went through them. I said, this is what it is, and I think it's very relative to what we're doing. And then you knocked it out of the ballpark.
Yeah, no, this is truly next level stuff, because I've always talked about the creative writing potential of ChatGPT. That was like the first thing I
Oh,
talked
look,
to people about when it came to
he
GPT. But
just
this is
pulled the
just like
syllabus right there. Look.
it's
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah,
this is just
it was a question
insane.
that someone asked, which was, where do I start? And I didn't have the answer either, and so I just said,
Where do I start?
where do I start? What's the syllabus? Like, just give me
Yeah.
something.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh my god! Like, and I'm not just in love with you for like this technical side of
Yeah.
you that you've built out, but also your philosophy behind it. Because I practice secular Buddhism, so like the way I think is also towards like peace and humanity. And one of the big things of Buddhism is interconnectedness, like being hyper aware of how interconnected every little thing is. Writing, creativity, art, the internet. It's all like they're all babies of each other, you know. So when you're being super open about how you're doing this, you're essentially creating more babies. And what do we know about creating more babies? That's how the world like prospers. Like it's like incredibly beautiful.
Yeah.
So
Basically,
keep it
the
up, man.
Star
This is
Wars
awesome.
also, you have the Force, either dark side or the light side.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no,
Yeah,
exactly, and
exactly.
you have to be on the side that, and you know what? I just remembered my point from before, which is that and
Oh yeah, go for it.
this might sound odd, but we have to trust the politicians, the uh, the people
The
repre-
leaders,
that are representing us, be it
right?
Elon Musk or eh, even Bill Gates. I mean, I have this conversation with my wife all the time because she feels that there's certain people that are evil and that they're going to use this technology for whatever. And I look at it and say, they're in a position of power, but at the same time, they understand how humanity works. So you can't look at it as they're trying to destroy us. They want to see us evolve as well. It's just, are you on the far right, or are you on the far level, or are you in the middle? And that's how humanity is sort of, we are structured.
Mhm.
I find that this tool, I won't even call it a tool, this collaborator can help sit in the middle and pull the right and left, and it will help. And we still need those institutions. We still need those knowledge based institutions, but they're going to change. But I do believe you still need those resources, and that's the discussion I've had with my wife, because she's like, "Well, you're discounting my education." I said, "No, I'm not. I'm saying, wouldn't it have been clearer for you in grade 9 to know this is where you were headed, as opposed to those years of not learning and learning something that wasn't practical?" Um, and then she can't argue that. Um,
Mhm.
that is where I'm coming from. And I
Yep.
just believe everything should be shared, so that we can change the mindsets of politicians as well, so that they understand where the collective is coming from. So we move in a direction that we all want to move towards, which
You know,
is,
there's a old saying, good people, they don't make too much noise, but they do keep doing their, good work. It's the few loud ones, or the bad ones that just shout a lot. So you hear them a lot more.
right.
But the good ones just mind their business. They're just doing what they're supposed to do. You'll never
Yeah.
hear them shouting because that's not what they do.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I believe
Yeah.
you know there's more good than bad, but I mean that's just part of the whole universe.
Yeah.
One has to complement the other.
Yeah, no, I mean the way to
Yeah.
bring both sides towards that middle ground, like you were saying, Brian. Like I've been making the joke a lot recently, where I keep saying like, "Oh, ChatGPT for president," because not because I seriously mean it, but I just like how it has this potential to kind of bridge that gap and become like this ultimate tool or a collaborator for moderation, like the actual base definition of like objective moderation between all issues, not just political issues, not just social issues, but like economic issues. Let's solve world hunger for
Right.
real this time, things like that. Like it really does have that potential if used correctly by those leaders, which unfortunately we do have to depend on to actually pull the levers. Will they do it? With pressure, I
Yeah.
think they will,
Yeah.
but we will have to pressure
Yeah.
them.
We still have to communicate and make sure, the collective, and I say collective, I just mean, wherever in Canada,
Mhm.
for example, we just have to make sure we're all kind of saying the same thing, and get the movement in a way that allows that to move forward and happen. Um, but right today, that's the processes we have. But in the future, who knows if they're going to exist the way they are structured today, because of this collaborator that is allowing us to level up in a way, right? We can ask any question and get the information we need. At least today we can. If it gets restricted, and that's, but I don't want to believe that it will get restricted. I believe
I
that,
I do like the word collaborator. I think that is the best way to describe this tool.
yeah,
I think places like the United States and Canada will have to lead the charge because there are some countries who've already restricted these type of tools, but that's not surprising, right? Like historically speaking, so we just have to do what Canada and the U.S. is known for, and hopefully kind of drive the rest of the world. Because if we're pushing this kind of concept forward, it's going to create the baseline for the rest of the world to follow along suit. because as we all know, doing this kind of stuff, AI makes you more powerful, but it doesn't necessarily make your life easier.
Yeah.
I've never been more busy in my freaking life ever since I started using AI and stuff. So it's like my life has not gotten easier. I used to be really chill compared to now. So that's one thing that people need to understand about it. This is something to accelerate you. It's not going to take things off your plate.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so I do have to get going soon, and the
But
podcast is going almost to 2 hours. But I thought it would be fun to end on
shoot it.
a fun question. So one thing I thought of before the podcast is if we could show ChatGPT and stuff like this, and this tool, for example, to like the ancient Greeks, like Aristotle, what do you think the reaction would be? I'll let anybody go
I don't know
first.
if I can answer that.
I think I can answer it, but I'll have to make a short animation with some dialogue. Literally. I
Okay.
mean, me saying it's not going to sound as good as somebody who can see the. I can envision it better than just talking about it. But yeah, it all. I don't know if I don't even know if Aristotle had a full hair, head with hair, or he was bald. But
I've seen
he'll
both images
definitely
of him.
have
I
a
don't
lot
think
of hair
anybody
just
knows for
fall
real.
out. But looking at it, I mean,
well, I mean, I've always heard the joke that if you showed Aristotle an iPhone, he would be like, okay, cool, whatever. Like it actually wouldn't blow him away too much because of the concept of it. But if you were to show him something like ChatGPT, and if you like know enough about history to recognize that like the Library of Alexandria existed back then and
yeah,
stuff, and like maybe the potential like alternate universe of what this could all be. I love concepts like that. I'm a huge history buff. Alternate history is like a sort of passion of mine. I like real history, but alternate history stuff, especially when you get in the sci-fi realm, is just super interesting. And yeah,
that's a
maybe we
great
should do
sci-fi
some animated
story.
shorts about it, just to kind of poke the
Yeah, and
just to
we
poke the
now
bear a little bit on that.
yes,
See what concepts come up. We'll use this tool to
we now have
we'll
Bryan's
use this
tool
tool
to
to
actually
explore.
test it out.
Yeah. Just create a story with exactly that question, and it will create a story for you. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well, we'll try it.
Well,
All
thanks,
We'll try
Bryan,
that.
for giving us some time. And I think, yeah, like him, I'm actually. I mean, I did not expect this at the end, but it's far better than what I was expecting. So that's great.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good.
Same.
Thank
well,
you.
you guys have a great rest of the day,
You as
and
well.
we'll be in
You
touch
too.
soon.
All right. Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Alrighty. Bye.
Thanks for having
All
me.
right, thanks, guys. I'll talk to you
Thank
later.
you for coming.